Princess Isabella Marie Catherine stood before the ornate mirror in her private chambers, her reflection showing a young woman of 23 whose life was about to change forever. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Ashford Palace, casting golden rays across the Persian rugs and antique furniture that had been her companions since childhood. Today marked the beginning of her final week as a resident of the only home she had ever known. The invitation had arrived 3 months earlier, written on cream-colored paper with the official seal of the Kingdom of Valdoria. Prince Alexander Edmund Worthington, heir to the Valdorian throne, had formally requested her hand in marriage. It was not a proposal born of romance, but rather a carefully orchestrated alliance between two neighboring kingdoms that had maintained peaceful relations for centuries. Isabella understood her duty, as she had been taught since she could walk and speak. Royal blood came with responsibilities that extended far beyond personal desires. Her lady-in-waiting, Margaret, entered the room carrying a silver tray with tea and fresh pastries from the palace kitchens. Margaret had been with Isabella since the princess was 7 years old, following the sudden death of Isabella's mother, Queen Anastasia. The older woman had become more than a servant; she was a confidant, a surrogate mother figure, and often the only person who truly understood the weight of Isabella's position. "Your Highness," Margaret said softly, setting the tray on the mahogany table near the window. "Your father has requested your presence in the blue drawing room at 10 o'clock. The final arrangements for your departure are being discussed." Isabella nodded, her fingers nervously adjusting the pearl necklace that had belonged to her grandmother. The jewelry was one of many family heirlooms she would be taking with her to Valdoria, physical reminders of her heritage and the legacy she carried. Each piece told a story of the queens who had worn them before her, women who had faced similar crossroads in their lives. The blue drawing room had always been Isabella's favorite space in the palace. Its walls were adorned with portraits of her ancestors, and the large windows offered a breathtaking view of the palace gardens where she had spent countless hours as a child. Her father, King Edmund Charles, sat at the head of the polished conference table, surrounded by his advisors and protocol officers. His expression was composed, but Isabella could see the sadness in his eyes that he was trying so hard to conceal. "Isabella, my dear," the king said as she entered, gesturing to the chair beside him. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss regarding your journey to Valdoria." The next hour was filled with detailed conversations about the wedding ceremony, the diplomatic protocol she would need to follow, and the responsibility she would undertake as the future Queen of Valdoria. Lord Chancellor Pemberton explained the intricate details of the marriage treaty, emphasizing how this union would strengthen trade relations and ensure continued peace between their kingdoms. Isabella listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions and demonstrating the diplomatic acumen she had been developing since adolescence. As the meeting concluded, her father asked to speak with her privately. The advisors filed out of the room, leaving father and daughter alone among the family portraits and afternoon shadows. King Edmund rose from his chair and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back as he gazed out at the gardens. "Isabella," he began, his voice carrying a weight she had rarely heard before. "I want you to know that I am incredibly proud of the woman you have become. Your mother would be proud as well." The mention of her mother brought an immediate tightness to Isabella's chest. Queen Anastasia had been beloved by the people and had possessed a rare combination of grace, intelligence, and compassion that had made her an exceptional ruler. Isabella often wondered if she could ever measure up to her mother's legacy, especially now that she would be representing her family's honor in a foreign kingdom. "Father," Isabella replied, moving to stand beside him at the window. "I understand my duty, and I will do everything in my power to honor our family and our people." King Edmund turned to face his daughter, his weathered hands gently taking hers. "Duty is important, my child, but so is happiness. I pray that in time, you and Prince Alexander will find genuine affection for one another. Your mother and I were fortunate in that regard. Our arranged marriage blossomed into true love." Isabella squeezed her father's hands, drawing comfort from his words. She had heard stories of her parents' courtship and early marriage, how they had gradually discovered not only respect for one another but deep, abiding love. It gave her hope that perhaps her own future might hold similar blessings. That evening, Isabella walked through the palace corridors one final time before her departure. Each room held memories that seemed more precious now that she was leaving them behind. The library where she had spent countless hours reading about history, philosophy, and literature. The music room where she had practiced piano and violin, often performing for small gatherings of family friends. The conservatory where she had learned to paint watercolors, capturing the changing seasons in the palace gardens. In the servants' quarters, Isabella made a point of visiting the staff who had cared for her throughout her life. Cook Mrs. Henderson, who had always saved special treats for the princess when she was young. James, the head gardener, who had taught her about flowers and helped her plant her own small garden when she was 10. Sarah, the young housemaid who had often helped Isabella with her correspondence and had dreams of traveling beyond the kingdom's borders. Each farewell was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. These people had known her not as a princess but as a young woman growing up within the palace walls. They had witnessed her childhood tears, celebrated her small victories, and supported her through the challenges of adolescence. Leaving them felt like leaving pieces of herself behind. Margaret found Isabella in the chapel at midnight, kneeling before the altar where her parents had been married 25 years earlier. The chapel was illuminated only by moonlight streaming through the stained glass windows, creating patterns of blue and gold across the stone floor. Isabella was praying, not just for strength and guidance, but for the ability to carry her family's values and traditions into her new life. "Your Highness," Margaret whispered, approaching quietly. "Perhaps you should rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." Isabella rose from her knees, smoothing her nightgown and turning to face the woman who had been her constant companion for so many years. "Margaret, I want to thank you for everything you have done for me. You have been far more than a lady-in-waiting. You have been family." Margaret's eyes filled with tears, though she maintained her composed demeanor. "It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve you, Princess. You carry within you the strength and wisdom of all the queens who came before you. Valdoria is fortunate indeed." The two women embraced, sharing a moment of genuine affection that transcended their official roles. Margaret had watched Isabella grow from a grieving child into a poised young woman ready to take on the responsibilities of queenship. It was a transformation that had required immense personal sacrifice and dedication. As dawn approached, Isabella stood on her bedroom balcony, looking out over the kingdom that had shaped her identity. The rolling hills stretched toward the horizon, dotted with villages where her future subjects lived their daily lives. She thought about the farmers preparing for the harvest season, the merchants opening their shops in the market towns, the children beginning their education in the kingdom's schools. All of these people were part of her responsibility, part of the legacy she would carry with her to Valdoria. The morning of her departure arrived with unusual quietness throughout the palace. The staff moved with subdued efficiency, loading trunks and ensuring that every detail of the journey had been carefully planned. Isabella's traveling wardrobe had been selected to represent her kingdom's finest craftsmanship, from the silk gowns created by the royal seamstresses to the leather boots made by the kingdom's most skilled cobblers. King Edmund presented his daughter with a final gift before her departure, a leather-bound journal that had belonged to her mother. The pages contained Queen Anastasia's thoughts and observations from her own early days as a young queen, insights about leadership, diplomacy, and the challenges of balancing personal desires with public duty. "Your mother began writing in this journal the day she married me," King Edmund explained, his voice thick with emotion. "She wanted to leave guidance for any daughters she might have, wisdom earned through her own experiences. I have saved it for this moment, when you are beginning your own journey as a queen." Isabella accepted the journal with reverence, understanding the magnitude of this gift. Her mother's words would accompany her to Valdoria, providing guidance and comfort during the inevitable moments of uncertainty that lay ahead. It was a connection to her heritage that no political alliance could ever diminish. The royal carriage waited in the palace courtyard, decorated with the kingdom's colors and bearing the family coat of arms. Isabella's traveling party included Margaret, 2 additional ladies-in-waiting, a security detail, and diplomatic representatives who would remain in Valdoria for the wedding ceremony. The journey would take 5 days, with planned stops at inns and noble estates along the route. As Isabella descended the palace steps for the final time, the staff lined the courtyard to bid her farewell. Their faces reflected a mixture of pride and sadness, knowing that they were witnessing the end of an era. The young princess who had grown up among them was now a woman ready to represent their kingdom on the international stage. King Edmund walked beside his daughter to the carriage, his arm linked through hers in a gesture of both formality and affection. Palace guards stood at attention, while the royal musicians played a traditional farewell melody that had been performed for departing royalty for over 2 centuries. "Remember, my dear daughter," the king said as they reached the carriage door, "you carry with you not only our family's honor but the hopes and dreams of our people. You are their representative in Valdoria, their voice in a foreign court. But, you are also my beloved child, and that will never change, regardless of the distance between us." Isabella curtsied deeply to her father, a formal acknowledgement of his authority and blessing. "I will not forget, father. Everything you and mother taught me will guide my actions and decisions." The carriage door opened, and Isabella prepared to step inside, knowing that when she emerged, it would be in a different kingdom, ready to begin a new chapter of her life. The moment held the weight of finality, the understanding that childhood and the security of home were now part of her past. As the carriage began to move, Isabella watched through the window as her father and the palace staff grew smaller in the distance. The familiar towers and battlements that had defined her world gradually disappeared behind the rolling hills. She clutched her mother's journal against her chest, drawing strength from the connection it represented to her family's legacy and the love that would always bind her to home, regardless of the physical distance. The journey to Valdoria stretched across 5 days of changing landscapes and countless emotions that Isabella struggled to process. Each mile that passed beneath the carriage wheels carried her further from everything familiar and closer to a future that remained largely unknown despite months of preparation. The diplomatic briefings had provided facts and protocols, but they could not prepare her heart for the reality of leaving everything she had ever known. The first night was spent at the estate of Lord Pemberton's brother, Sir William Pemberton, whose manor house sat on the border between Isabella's kingdom and the neutral territories that separated the 2 realms. The estate was grand in its own right, though smaller and more intimate than the palace Isabella had called home. Lady Pemberton, a gentle woman in her 50s, had prepared the finest guest accommodations and treated the traveling party with gracious hospitality. During dinner, Sir William shared stories of his diplomatic missions to various European courts, painting pictures of the political complexities that governed relationships between kingdoms. His tales were both fascinating and sobering, reminding Isabella of the delicate balance she would need to maintain as she navigated her new role. Every word she spoke, every gesture she made, would be observed and interpreted by those seeking to understand the strength and character of her homeland. Margaret noticed that Isabella ate little during the meal, her usual appetite diminished by the anxiety that had been building since their departure. The princess maintained perfect composure throughout the evening's conversations, asking thoughtful questions and expressing appropriate interest in her host's experiences. But Margaret could see the telltale signs of stress and the slight tension around Isabella's eyes and the way her fingers occasionally fidgeted with her mother's ring. That night, alone in the guest chamber, Isabella opened her mother's journal for the first time. The elegant handwriting revealed intimate thoughts and reflections that felt like a conversation across time. Queen Anastasia had written about her own fears and uncertainties when she first arrived at Isabella's father's court, describing the challenge of earning respect and trust in an environment where every noble family had their own agenda and expectations. One passage particularly resonated with Isabella: "I have learned that true strength comes not from hiding our vulnerabilities, but from acknowledging them while refusing to be paralyzed by fear." The people need to see that their queen is human, capable of understanding their struggles because she faces struggles of her own. Perfection is not relatable, growth and perseverance are. The words brought both comfort and challenge to Isabella's heart. Her mother had faced similar uncertainties and had not only survived but thrived, becoming beloved by her people and respected by foreign dignitaries. If Queen Anastasia could transform arranged marriage into a loving partnership and political duty into passionate service, perhaps Isabella could do the same. The second day of travel brought them into the neutral territories, a buffer zone maintained by treaty between the various kingdoms to prevent border disputes and provide safe passage for diplomatic missions. The landscape here was different from home, with dense forests giving way to rolling meadows dotted with small farming communities. Isabella found herself studying the faces of the people they passed, wondering about their lives and concerns, trying to understand the broader world she was entering. A brief stop in the market town of Millbrook provided Isabella with her first real glimpse of life beyond royal circles since beginning her journey. While the guards procured fresh supplies and the horses rested, Isabella asked Margaret to walk with her through the town square. Disguised in a simple traveling cloak, she was able to observe the interactions between merchants and customers, children playing in the street, and elderly residents sharing news and gossip on wooden benches. One young mother approached their small group, her infant daughter fussing in her arms. Without thinking, Isabella smiled at the baby and offered a gentle word of encouragement to the tired mother. The woman's face lit up with gratitude for the kind acknowledgement, unaware that she was speaking with a princess. The brief encounter reminded Isabella that beneath all the political complexities and diplomatic protocols, her role ultimately existed to serve real people with real needs and concerns. Margaret observed this interaction with quiet pride, recognizing it as evidence of Isabella's natural compassion and instinct for connection. These qualities would serve her well in Valdoria, where she would need to build relationships not only with the royal family but with nobles, servants, and common citizens who would judge her worthiness to become their queen. As they continued their journey, Isabella began to notice the gradual changes in architecture and landscape that indicated their approach to Valdorian territory. The farmhouses showed subtle differences in design, reflecting different building traditions and cultural preferences. Road signs began appearing in Valdorian script alongside the common language, reminding Isabella that she was entering a realm with its own unique identity and customs. The third evening brought them to an inn called the Golden Crown, located just inside Valdorian borders. The innkeeper, a robust man named Thomas Fletcher, recognized the royal traveling party despite their attempt to maintain discretion. Word of Princess Isabella's journey had preceded them, and the local population was curious about the foreign princess who would soon become part of their royal family. The inn's common room buzzed with quiet excitement as local residents hoped for a glimpse of their future queen. Isabella understood that this was her first opportunity to make an impression on Valdorian citizens, and she approached the evening with careful consideration. After consulting with her diplomatic advisors, she agreed to make a brief appearance in the common room, allowing the local people to meet her in an informal setting. The encounter exceeded everyone's expectations. Isabella's genuine warmth and sincere interest in learning about local customs and concerns immediately won over the gathered residents. She asked thoughtful questions about their community, listened carefully to their responses, and shared appropriate details about her own homeland without revealing anything politically sensitive. By the end of the evening, the inn's patrons were speaking enthusiastically about their future queen's grace and intelligence. Thomas Fletcher privately confided to Margaret that he had initially harbored doubts about an arranged marriage between their prince and a foreign princess. Political alliances, he believed, rarely produced the kind of devoted leadership that truly served the people's interests. However, after observing Isabella's natural ability to connect with common citizens, he felt optimistic about her potential to become a beloved queen who would genuinely care about Valdorian welfare. The fourth day brought them within sight of the Valdorian capital city, and Isabella felt her nerves intensify with each passing hour. The city's skyline was dominated by the impressive silhouette of Valdorian Royal Palace, a massive structure that combined medieval fortress architecture with Renaissance additions. Spires and towers reached toward the sky, while extensive gardens and courtyards spread across the hilltop location like a small city unto itself. As their carriage approached the city gates, Isabella could see crowds of citizens lining the streets, eager to catch their first glimpse of the foreign princess. Children waved small flags bearing both kingdoms' colors, while adults applauded politely as the royal procession passed. The scene was both thrilling and overwhelming, reminding Isabella that her every action from this moment forward would be scrutinized by people who had already formed opinions about her worthiness to join their royal family. The palace gates opened to reveal a courtyard filled with assembled nobles, court officials, and members of the royal household. Isabella could see Prince Alexander waiting at the top of the marble steps, flanked by King Frederick and Queen Marguerite of Valdoria. This would be her first face-to-face meeting with the man she was destined to marry, and her heart raced with anticipation and anxiety. Prince Alexander appeared exactly as he had been described in the diplomatic correspondence, tall and well-built, with dark hair and serious blue eyes that seemed to assess everything around him with careful consideration. His bearing suggested confidence and authority, qualities essential in a future king, but Isabella found herself wondering what lay beneath the formal exterior.
Would they be able to find common ground? Could they build the kind of partnership that would serve both kingdoms and, perhaps, eventually, bring them personal happiness?
As the carriage came to a complete stop, Isabella took a deep breath and prepared for the moment that would define the rest of her life. Margaret squeezed her hand in a gesture of support and encouragement, whispering, "Remember, Your Highness, you carry the strength of all who came before you." The carriage door opened, and Isabella emerged into the bright afternoon sunlight of her new home. Every eye in the courtyard focused on her as she curtsied deeply to the Valdorian royal family, her movements graceful and confident despite the emotional turmoil she felt inside. This was the moment she had been preparing for since childhood, the culmination of years of education, training, and personal development designed to prepare her for exactly this responsibility. Prince Alexander descended the steps to greet her personally, his expression formal but not unkind. As he bowed and offered his arm to escort her into the palace, Isabella caught a glimpse of something in his eyes that gave her hope. Perhaps he was feeling some of the same uncertainty and anticipation that she experienced. Perhaps they were both wondering whether this political arrangement could evolve into something more meaningful and fulfilling. "Princess Isabella," Prince Alexander said, his voice carrying well-modulated tones that suggested excellent education and natural authority. "Welcome to Valdoria. I trust your journey was comfortable, and I hope you will find our kingdom worthy of your time and attention." "Thank you, Your Highness," Isabella replied, accepting his offered arm with practiced grace. "I am honored by your hospitality and eager to learn more about the kingdom I hope to serve faithfully." Their words were carefully chosen, appropriate for the formal setting and the many observers who would report every detail to interested parties throughout both kingdoms. But Isabella noticed that Prince Alexander's grip on her arm was gentle rather than possessive, and his pace up the palace steps was considerate of her traveling attire and the emotional weight of the moment. The palace interior was magnificent, with soaring ceilings, intricate tapestries, and artwork that spoke of centuries of royal tradition. Isabella tried to absorb every detail while maintaining appropriate composure, knowing that this would be her home for the rest of her life. The grandeur was impressive, but she found herself looking for signs of warmth and personal touches that might indicate what kind of family atmosphere existed behind the formal protocols. Queen Marguerite proved to be a pleasant surprise, greeting Isabella with genuine warmth while maintaining appropriate royal dignity. Her smile seemed authentic rather than diplomatic, and her first words to Isabella were not about politics or ceremony but about ensuring that the princess felt comfortable after her long journey. It was a small gesture, but one that suggested the Valdorian royal family might genuinely care about Isabella's personal well-being rather than viewing her simply as a political asset. King Frederick was more reserved in his greeting, though respectful and appropriately welcoming. Isabella could see where Prince Alexander had inherited his serious demeanor and careful way of evaluating situations before responding. The king's questions about her journey and her father's health were clearly intended to assess her intelligence and diplomatic awareness, and Isabella answered thoughtfully while providing the appropriate level of detail. The formal reception lasted 2 hours, allowing Isabella to meet key members of the Valdorian court and begin the process of understanding the political dynamics that would shape her new environment. She was introduced to the chancellor, the heads of various noble families, military leaders, and church officials who would play important roles in the wedding ceremony and her subsequent life as a member of the royal family. Each introduction provided valuable information about the expectations and relationships she would need to navigate. Some nobles seemed genuinely pleased about the marriage alliance and eager to welcome her into their community. Others maintained polite but reserved attitudes that suggested she would need to prove herself worthy of their respect and trust. Isabella filed away these observations, understanding that building successful relationships with these individuals would be crucial to her effectiveness as future queen. As the formal reception concluded, Queen Marguerite personally escorted Isabella to the chambers that had been prepared for her use during the week leading up to the wedding. The apartments were luxurious and comfortable, decorated with fresh flowers and appointed with everything she might need for her stay. But, more importantly to Isabella, they felt welcoming rather than coldly formal, suggesting that genuine thought had been given to making her feel at home. Isabella's first week in Valdoria passed in a whirlwind of activities designed to integrate her into the royal household and prepare for the upcoming wedding ceremony. Each day brought new experiences, challenges, and opportunities to form relationships that would shape her future as queen. The palace staff, initially formal and somewhat distant, gradually warmed to her genuine kindness and sincere interest in learning about their traditions and customs. Margaret had been assigned quarters adjacent to Isabella's apartments, providing the princess with familiar support during this period of adjustment. The loyal lady-in-waiting proved invaluable in helping Isabella navigate the subtle differences between Valdorian and her home kingdom's protocols. Everything from mealtimes to formal address required slight adjustments that could easily trip up someone unfamiliar with local customs. On her third morning in the palace, Isabella was invited to join Prince Alexander for a private breakfast in the morning room, away from the formal dining hall where most meals were shared with the broader royal household. This was their first opportunity for genuine conversation without the watchful eyes and listening ears of court officials, diplomats, and curious nobles. Prince Alexander had prepared carefully for this meeting, understanding that their ability to communicate effectively would determine not only their personal happiness but their capacity to rule together successfully. He had spent considerable time researching Isabella's education, interests, and family background, hoping to find common ground that might serve as the foundation for mutual respect and eventual affection. "I hope you have found your accommodations comfortable," Prince Alexander began as they were served fresh fruit, pastries, and coffee by discreet servants. "My mother was quite concerned about ensuring that everything met with your approval." Isabella appreciated his consideration and the gentle way he introduced personal topics into their conversation. "Queen Marguerite has been extraordinarily thoughtful. The rooms are beautiful, and the staff has been very helpful in explaining various customs and expectations." Their conversation gradually moved beyond polite formalities as they discovered shared interests in literature, music, and history. Isabella was pleasantly surprised to learn that Prince Alexander was an accomplished musician who composed pieces for piano and violin in his private time. His education had included extensive study of diplomatic history, military strategy, and economic policy, but he had also developed genuine appreciation for the arts and philosophical inquiry. "I understand that you speak several languages," Prince Alexander observed, clearly impressed by the reports he had received about her education. "That skill will be invaluable in diplomatic situations, particularly when we host state visits from various European courts." Isabella nodded, explaining how her tutors had emphasized the importance of being able to communicate directly with foreign dignitaries rather than relying entirely on translators. She had mastered French, Spanish, and German, while developing conversational ability in Italian and Latin. The prince revealed that he had similar linguistic training, plus additional study in Russian and Dutch to facilitate trade relationships with those regions. As they talked, both Isabella and Prince Alexander began to relax slightly, discovering that their personalities were more compatible than either had dared to hope. They shared similar values about the responsibilities of leadership and the importance of serving their people's genuine interests rather than simply maintaining traditional privileges. Both had been raised to understand that royal authority came with obligations that extended far beyond personal comfort or preference. The prince described some of the domestic challenges facing Valdoria, including economic pressures from changing trade patterns, agricultural difficulties caused by recent weather problems, and social tensions resulting from rapid technological changes affecting traditional industries. Isabella listened thoughtfully, asking intelligent questions that demonstrated her understanding of complex policy issues and her genuine concern for the welfare of people she had not yet met but would soon represent. This first substantial conversation laid important groundwork for their developing relationship. While neither could claim romantic feelings at such an early stage, they could see the potential for deep mutual respect and effective partnership. Both left the breakfast feeling cautiously optimistic about their future together, recognizing that they shared fundamental values and complementary strengths that could make them effective rulers. The following days brought a series of formal events designed to introduce Isabella to Valdorian society and allow various groups to evaluate their future queen. She attended receptions hosted by different noble families, visited charitable institutions supported by the royal family, and observed court proceedings to better understand the kingdom's legal and administrative systems. Each event provided valuable insights into Valdorian culture and the expectations placed on their royalty. Isabella was impressed by the kingdom's emphasis on education, noting the significant resources devoted to schools and universities. The charitable institutions demonstrated genuine concern for vulnerable populations, with well-organized programs to support orphans, elderly citizens, and families affected by economic hardship. During her visit to St. Catherine's Hospital, Isabella met Sister Mary Josephine, an elderly nun who had served the institution for over 40 years. The sister's dedication to caring for the sick and poor made a profound impression on the princess, who spent nearly 3 hours learning about the hospital's work and the challenges they faced in serving growing numbers of patients with limited resources. "Your Highness," Sister Mary Josephine said as Isabella prepared to leave, "I can see in your eyes the same compassion that moved Queen Marguerite to establish our children's wing 15 years ago. The people need leaders who truly understand that power exists to serve others, not oneself." Isabella was deeply moved by this observation and the obvious sincerity behind it. The encounter reinforced her determination to use her position as queen to make meaningful improvements in people's lives, rather than simply enjoying the privileges of royal status. She made mental notes about the hospital's needs, already planning ways she might be able to help expand their services and improve conditions for patients and staff. Prince Alexander had arranged for Isabella to receive private tours of the palace's most significant spaces, including the royal library, the portrait gallery, and the chapel where their wedding ceremony would take place. Each location told stories about Valdorian history and the previous generations of rulers who had shaped the kingdom's character and values. The royal library particularly impressed Isabella, as it contained over 50,000 volumes collected over 3 centuries. Prince Alexander personally guided her through the collection, sharing his knowledge of various texts and revealing his own intellectual interests. They discovered a mutual passion for historical biographies and philosophical works that examined questions of leadership, justice, and social responsibility. "These books have been my teachers and companions since childhood," Prince Alexander confided as they examined a rare manuscript about medieval governance. "I often come here when facing difficult decisions, seeking wisdom from those who ruled before us." Isabella understood this impulse completely, having spent countless hours in her father's library wrestling with complex questions about duty, personal desires, and the challenge of making decisions that would affect thousands of lives. They spent the afternoon discussing various historical figures whose examples had influenced their thinking about leadership and the proper use of royal authority. The chapel visit proved especially meaningful for Isabella, who had maintained deep religious faith throughout her life. The sanctuary was magnificent, with soaring Gothic arches, intricate stained glass windows depicting biblical scenes, and an atmosphere of profound reverence. Prince Alexander explained the history of various architectural features and shared stories about royal ceremonies that had taken place there over the centuries. "My grandparents were married in this chapel 62 years ago," Prince Alexander told her as they stood before the altar where their own ceremony would soon take place. "Their marriage began as a political alliance but grew into one of the great love stories in our family's history. They ruled together for 38 years and remained devoted to each other until my grandfather's death." Isabella found this story both inspiring and challenging, wondering whether she and Prince Alexander would be able to achieve similar depth in their relationship. The possibility gave her hope, while the uncertainty reminded her that building a successful marriage would require patience, commitment, and mutual effort from both partners. Queen Marguerite arranged for Isabella to spend time with the palace's senior female staff, learning about household management and the practical aspects of royal entertaining. These sessions proved invaluable, as they covered everything from menu planning for state dinners to the protocol requirements for various types of official events. Isabella discovered that being queen involved far more administrative responsibility than she had initially realized. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell, had managed palace operations for 23 years and possessed encyclopedic knowledge of royal traditions, guest preferences, and the diplomatic significance of various ceremonial details. Under her guidance, Isabella learned about the careful planning required for successful state visits, including consideration of religious dietary restrictions, cultural sensitivities, and political tensions that might affect seating arrangements. "Your Highness," Mrs. Hartwell explained during one of their sessions, "successful royal entertaining requires understanding that every detail sends a message. The flowers chosen for table arrangements, the wine selected for toasts, even the music performed during dinner all communicate respect for guests and understanding of their cultural values."
Isabella absorbed these lessons eagerly, recognizing that social events would be important opportunities for advancing diplomatic objectives and strengthening relationships with foreign courts. She began to understand how royal traditions had evolved to serve political purposes while maintaining the appearance of gracious hospitality and cultural celebration. The final preparations for the wedding ceremony required Isabella to work closely with the palace's protocol office, the church officials who would conduct the service, and the military units responsible for ceremonial functions. Every aspect of the event had been planned with meticulous attention to detail, ensuring that the ceremony would properly honor both kingdoms while creating a memorable celebration for the people. Isabella's wedding dress had been created by the kingdom's most skilled seamstresses, incorporating traditional Valdorian design elements with fabrics and embellishments that acknowledged her own heritage. The gown was magnificent, featuring hand-embroidered silk with pearls and silver thread, but Isabella found herself more concerned with the symbolic weight of the garment than its aesthetic beauty. 2 nights before the wedding, Isabella received an unexpected private audience with King Frederick, who had requested the opportunity to speak with her alone about the responsibilities and challenges she would face as queen. The conversation took place in his private study, a room filled with maps, military histories, and personal mementos from his long reign. "Princess Isabella," the king began, his manner more relaxed than she had previously observed, "I want to share some thoughts about the unique position you will occupy as Alexander's wife and partner in leadership." King Frederick spoke candidly about the pressures of royal life, the constant scrutiny from nobles and commoners alike, and the challenge of maintaining personal happiness while fulfilling public obligations. He emphasized the importance of finding trusted advisors, maintaining strong relationships with key military and political leaders, and never losing sight of the people's welfare amid the complexities of court politics. "Your son has spoken to me about his vision for Valdoria's future," Isabella replied thoughtfully. "I am impressed by his understanding of the challenges facing the kingdom and his commitment to serving the people's genuine interests." King Frederick smiled at this response, recognizing both Isabella's diplomatic skill and her sincere appreciation for his son's qualities. "Alexander has been well prepared for leadership, but ruling effectively requires partnership. I believe you possess the intelligence, character, and strength necessary to be not just his wife, but his true partner in governance." This conversation gave Isabella considerable confidence as she approached her wedding day. King Frederick's approval and encouragement suggested that she had successfully demonstrated her worthiness to join the royal family and her capacity to fulfill the demanding role of queen. The validation from such an experienced ruler provided important reassurance during this period of intense preparation and mounting anxiety. The night before her wedding, Isabella spent several hours alone in her chambers, reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment and contemplating the responsibilities that lay ahead. She wrote in her mother's journal, recording her thoughts and feelings about leaving childhood behind and accepting the full weight of adult responsibility for others' welfare. Margaret helped her prepare for bed, both women understanding that this would be their final evening together as princess and lady-in-waiting. Their relationship would necessarily change after the wedding, as Isabella would need to establish her own household and develop new patterns of support appropriate to her role as queen. "Your Highness," Margaret said as she brushed Isabella's hair, "you have grown into exactly the kind of woman your mother hoped you would become. Tomorrow, you will take your place among the queens who have served their people with wisdom and grace." Isabella squeezed Margaret's hand affectionately, grateful for the years of faithful service and genuine care that had helped shape her into someone capable of facing the challenges ahead. As she prepared for sleep, she felt a mixture of excitement, nervousness, and profound determination to prove worthy of the trust being placed in her by both kingdoms. The morning of Isabella's wedding dawned clear and bright, with autumn sunlight streaming through the tall windows of her chambers in golden rays that seemed to bless the momentous day ahead. She had awakened before sunrise, her mind alert despite having slept only fitfully through the night. Today would mark the end of her life as Princess Isabella of her father's kingdom and the beginning of her new identity as Queen Isabella of Valdoria. Margaret entered quietly, carrying a breakfast tray with delicate pastries, fresh fruit, and chamomile tea selected specifically to calm wedding day nerves. The faithful lady-in-waiting moved with practiced efficiency, understanding that this morning would require careful management of time and emotions to ensure that everything proceeded smoothly. "Good morning, Your Highness," Margaret said softly, setting the tray on the table by the window.
The palace is already bustling with preparations. The florists arrived at dawn to arrange the chapel decorations, and the musicians are practicing in the Great Hall. Isabella accepted a cup of tea gratefully, finding comfort in the familiar ritual even as her heart raced with anticipation. Through her window, she could see the palace gardens filled with early morning activity as staff members made final preparations for the outdoor reception that would follow the wedding ceremony. Hundreds of guests would soon arrive from across Europe, representing the diplomatic and social connections that made this marriage an event of international significance. The wedding dress hung in the dressing room, magnificent in its intricate detail and symbolic importance. Isabella had seen it many times during fittings and final adjustments, but today it would transform her from foreign princess to Valdorian queen. The gown represented countless hours of skilled craftsmanship by the kingdom's finest seamstresses, who had created something both beautiful and deeply meaningful. Queen Marguerite arrived with Isabella's wedding jewelry, pieces that had belonged to Valdorian queens for generations and would now become part of Isabella's inheritance. The diamond and sapphire tiara had been worn by Prince Alexander's grandmother on her wedding day, while the matching necklace and earrings had been gifts from various European courts over the centuries. "These jewels carry the blessings of all the queens who wore them before you," Queen Marguerite said as she carefully arranged the pieces on the dressing table. "Each stone has witnessed moments of joy and challenge, triumph and heartbreak. They will remind you that you are part of a legacy that extends far beyond your individual life." Isabella was deeply moved by this gesture and the trust it represented. The Valdorian royal family was formally accepting her into their lineage, sharing their most precious possessions and embracing her as a true daughter rather than a political necessity. The weight of this acceptance brought both honor and responsibility that she felt determined to prove worthy of. As morning progressed into afternoon, Isabella's chambers filled with the people responsible for preparing her for the ceremony. The royal hairdresser created an elaborate style that would support the heavy tiara while framing Isabella's face in a way that photographs would capture beautifully for historical records. Makeup artists worked carefully to enhance her natural beauty while ensuring that she would appear radiant under the chapel's lighting and in the formal portraits that would commemorate the day. Margaret and 2 additional ladies-in-waiting helped Isabella into the wedding gown, managing the intricate fastenings and ensuring that every detail was perfect. The dress fit flawlessly, the result of multiple fittings and adjustments that had taken place over recent weeks. As Isabella looked at herself in the full-length mirror, she saw not just a bride but a future queen ready to accept the responsibilities and privileges of her new role. The final touch was her mother's pearl necklace, which Isabella had requested permission to wear alongside the Valdorian royal jewelry. The simple strand of pearls represented her connection to her family's heritage and the values that would guide her actions as queen. It was a subtle but meaningful way to honor her mother's memory and carry forward the wisdom Queen Anastasia had shared through her journal. Prince Alexander waited in the chapel's antechamber, surrounded by his groomsmen and receiving final instructions from the protocol officers about the ceremony's precise timing and sequence. He had spent the morning reviewing his vows and meeting with foreign dignitaries who had arrived for the wedding. His father had given him final words of advice about marriage and leadership, emphasizing the partnership he and Isabella would need to build for successful rule. The prince wore the formal uniform of the Valdorian Royal Guard, with ceremonial sword and decorations that acknowledged his military training and future role as commander-in-chief of the kingdom's armed forces. His appearance was imposing and dignified, reflecting the seriousness of the commitments he was about to make and the authority he would soon exercise as king. King Edmund had arrived the previous evening with a delegation from Isabella's homeland, bringing final letters from family members and longtime servants who wanted to share their blessings for her new life. The reunion with her father was emotional but brief, as royal protocol required careful management of their interactions to maintain appropriate diplomatic balance between the two kingdoms. "My beloved daughter," King Edmund said during their private meeting, "you have grown into everything your mother and I hoped you would become. Today you begin a new chapter that will test everything you have learned and reveal strengths you may not yet know you possess." Isabella treasured these words from her father, understanding that their relationship would necessarily change as she took on her new responsibilities. She would always be his daughter, but she would no longer be his subject. The shift represented both loss and growth, endings and beginnings that characterized all significant life transitions. As the afternoon progressed,
guests began arriving at the palace chapel.
European nobility, diplomatic representatives, military leaders, church officials, and selected citizens filled the sanctuary to witness the historic ceremony. The chapel had been decorated with thousands of flowers in both kingdoms' colors, creating an atmosphere of celebration that honored the political alliance while acknowledging the personal significance of marriage. Isabella's final preparations took place in the chapel's bride chamber, where she spent a few minutes alone in prayer and reflection before the ceremony began. She held her mother's journal, drawing strength from Queen Anastasia's words about courage, duty, and the importance of remaining true to one's values even when facing unfamiliar challenges. Margaret knocked softly on the door, indicating that the time had come to begin the processional. Isabella took a deep breath, smoothed her dress one final time, and prepared to walk down the aisle toward her future. Every step would carry her closer to a new identity and responsibilities that would shape the rest of her life. The chapel doors opened, and Isabella appeared at the threshold with her father beside her. The assembled guests rose to their feet as the wedding march began, played by the royal orchestra with solemnity and grandeur appropriate to the occasion. King Edmund walked proudly beside his daughter, his expression reflecting both joy for her future and sadness at the symbolic end of her childhood. Prince Alexander waited at the altar, his bearing confident and welcoming as he watched his bride approach. Their eyes met across the length of the chapel, sharing a moment of mutual recognition and commitment that transcended the political arrangements that had brought them together. In that instant, both understood that they were choosing to embrace not just duty but the possibility of genuine partnership and affection. The wedding ceremony itself was magnificent and deeply moving, incorporating traditions from both kingdoms while emphasizing the sacred nature of the vows being exchanged. Archbishop William conducted the service with dignity and warmth, speaking about the responsibilities of marriage and leadership that would define Isabella and Alexander's shared life. When the moment came for Isabella to promise her love, honor, and loyalty to Prince Alexander, her voice was clear and strong, carrying throughout the chapel with conviction that impressed all who heard her. She was not simply reciting formal words but making genuine commitments that she intended to fulfill regardless of the challenges that might arise. Prince Alexander's vows were equally heartfelt and sincere, demonstrating his understanding that marriage required emotional investment and personal growth beyond political calculation. His promise to cherish and protect Isabella reflected not just formal obligation but genuine care for her welfare and happiness. The exchange of rings symbolized their union before God and the assembled witnesses, creating bonds that would endure for the rest of their lives. The rings themselves were works of art, crafted by the kingdom's finest jewelers and inscribed with meaningful quotes about love, commitment, and service to others. As Archbishop William pronounced them husband and wife, Isabella felt a profound sense of transformation that went far beyond the change in her title. She was no longer the young woman who had left her father's palace a week earlier, uncertain about her future and anxious about her ability to fulfill unknown responsibilities. She was now Queen Isabella, ready to serve Valdoria with everything she had learned and everything she hoped to become. The kiss that sealed their marriage was gentle and respectful, acknowledging both the public nature of the moment and the private commitment they were making to each other. The chapel erupted in celebration as the congregation recognized the completion of the ceremony and the beginning of a new era for both kingdoms. The processional from the chapel to the palace ballroom gave Isabella her first opportunity to greet her new subjects as their queen. The crowds that lined the route cheered enthusiastically, waving flags and flowers in welcome. Children called out blessings and congratulations, while adults applauded the young couple who would guide their kingdom into the future. Isabella waved graciously to the crowds, her training and royal deportment serving her well as she managed the complex emotions of the moment. She was deeply moved by the warmth of her reception and the obvious hope that people placed in her ability to serve them well. The responsibility was overwhelming, but also inspiring as she recognized the trust being placed in her leadership. The wedding reception brought together hundreds of guests for an evening of celebration that would be remembered for years to come. Isabella and Alexander moved gracefully through the formal receiving line, greeting dignitaries and family friends while demonstrating the partnership that would characterize their rule. Every interaction was an opportunity to build relationships and demonstrate their commitment to diplomatic cooperation and mutual respect. The evening's highlight was their first dance as husband and wife, performed to a waltz composed specifically for the occasion by the royal musician. As they moved together across the ballroom floor, surrounded by guests and illuminated by hundreds of candles, Isabella felt a sense of completion and new beginning that brought tears of joy to her eyes. Prince Alexander noticed her emotion and gently squeezed her hand, offering silent support and understanding. In that moment, Isabella knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together as true partners committed to each other's welfare and their people's service. As the evening drew to a close, Isabella stood on the palace balcony, looking out over the kingdom that was now her home. The lights of the city twinkled below like earthbound stars, each one representing lives that she and Alexander would touch through their decisions and leadership. The weight of responsibility was immense, but so was her determination to prove worthy of the trust placed in her. Margaret appeared beside her, carrying a warm cloak to protect against the evening chill. "How do you feel, Your Majesty?" she asked softly, using Isabella's new title for the first time. Isabella considered the question carefully before responding. "I feel ready," she said finally, her voice filled with quiet confidence. "Ready to serve, ready to learn, ready to grow into the queen these people deserve." The transition was complete. Princess Isabella of her father's kingdom had become Queen Isabella of Valdoria, carrying forward the best of her heritage while embracing the responsibilities and opportunities of her new life. Tomorrow would bring the first day of her reign, with all its challenges and possibilities. Tonight, she stood poised between her past and future, grateful for the journey that had brought her to this moment and committed to the path that lay ahead.